This is Nursing Uncensored. I'm your host, Adrianne Benning, and I invite you to listen in on conversations I've had with real nurses about the crazy and wonderful lives we lead. This podcast is meant to create laughter in addition to serious discussion, and nothing is off limits. We're always honest, but we're not always safe for work. Please listen responsibly. Welcome to Nursing Uncensored. It's me, Adrianne, and I'm here today with guest Emily Mazurak. Emily, hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
Welcome. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
I'm happy to have you on. When I got a message from you saying, hey, I want to be on the show, love it when people message me because there's so much good stuff out there that I maybe just haven't caught on to yet. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm really excited to hear more about you. And the title of the show is going to give it away for people, but we're talking about the Fill Up Your Cup project.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to hear about it. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. It's going to be a good time. So will you start out by just telling the audience a little bit about yourself and like kind of your journey into nursing and how this all came to be?
Sure. So I'm actually a second degree student. My background is in human services and public health, so it all really fits really nicely together into a little package. And my background is mainly in pediatrics. And after 4 years of being in the PICU, I kind of knew that something was up, but denial is a great thing and you can push so much stuff down, right? So I was interviewing for a brand new PICU job. I had just relocated and I was talking with the manager. I didn't really think the job was for me, but for so long I defined myself as a PICU nurse. I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. And I was just going to suck it up and kind of push through. And the manager was talking about all the burnout symptoms that they were seeing in their staff. And as she was ticking them off, I was ticking them off on my own finger. Things like anxiety before work, right? You know, bad sleeping patterns, not excited to go to work. And after about 5 or 6, I started having a panic attack in the middle of this interview.
Oh my God,
and I was like,
did they get this list about me?
Right, exactly. And I was like, okay, I'm like, try to keep your cool. Don't look too like sweaty and just finish the interview and then just regroup in the car. And that's pretty much what I did. So, of course, I went into full-blown panic mode because I was like, what am I going to do? If I can't be a PICU nurse, what other kind of nursing is there? I'm going to have to leave nursing. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And then kind of after that initial shock wore off and I kind of like sat with myself for a little bit, I just kind of started looking for options, right? I knew that I didn't want to do ICU and I didn't want to do adult. So I guess one of the good things about nursing is that you can find kind of what fits what you need in that moment. And for me, it was a pediatric radiology job, right? I love kids. I love peds. So I would still be in that arena, but a little bit more of a quieter environment and like a little bit of a different opportunity to grow with. And then I realized that I needed to start working on myself, right? I had gotten to such a dark place. And I think as nurses, we're so busy helping other people and pouring ourselves into other people that we sometimes get lost in that. And I knew that I needed to make a change and make it quick. Because if not, my nursing career would be over pretty much before it began. And I'm still relatively new. I've been a nurse for about 7 years. So, it's too early for me to be thinking about a different kind of track, going back to school for another time. And I think what really helped was I just decided that I probably needed to seek someone else, right? Clearly what I was doing was not working and I needed a little bit of outside counsel. So I hired a coach. It was a nutrition coach at the time. And not only were we doing food stuff, but it was a lot of kind of inner self-development work, which was great, something I'd never really done before. And kind of as we started to chip away at all these problems and to kind of see what was really going on, I started to see the value of being able to, for lack of a better word, fill up my cup first, right? To pour into myself so I could give back to my patients, to my friends and my family, and kind of start to fix the damage that I had done for so long by, feeding into the denial that I had had. And kind of things just slowly rolled from there. I wouldn't say that I am the perfect self-development person, but it's a journey, right? You just try to make every day a little bit better than the day before. And kind of after I had joined a mentorship program, I realized that my new calling or one of my callings was going to be to give back to the nursing community and to help people who were in the same spot I was in. I think for so many of us that are in this kind of burnout situation, we all kind of laugh it off and there isn't really a safe, supportive space for us to go to. Sure, there are resources out there and management loves to say, we're going to have this yoga or, somebody brought donuts. But at the end of the day, that's not what's going to help you support
That's not a permanent thing in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the Fill Up Your Cup project was born from, just me seeing this huge need. I know there are tons of other nurse mentors out there, nurse coaches. And so clearly there's a need for this. And I was just excited to be able to tell my story and just to get it out there to kind of normalize the burnout in the nursing community. So hopefully my story can, help somebody else get help.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you touched on was that part of the denial for nurses is that we think that this is how it is, or we're supposed to be tough, or I don't know, there's like a million things that we tell ourselves that keep us from doing the things that we need to do. And it is cumulative. Like you're not just going to undo months or years worth of burnout by like having like a spa weekend. It's not like that.
Right.
I spend so much time telling like family members of patients, you can't pour from an empty cup. I say that phrase all the time, but how often do I think about it in terms of myself? So this has been something that I have been on like a relatively new journey with in trying to identify what it is that's like creating this anxiety before. Yeah, that's as you were talking about the like list of like burnout criteria. I had that moment. I was fresh out of nursing school. I was a brand new nurse at my hospital and they were doing like this workshop, how to tell if you're burned out. And I was just like, yep. Shit. Yep.
Right.
Yep. It's true. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to spend the weekend and, do a face mask. And that's not the self-care that we're talking about. We're talking about like really maintaining ourselves. And sometimes that's a new perspective or, a new change of scenery, like a new job. But sometimes if you're like exhausted and burned out in one job, unless you do something internally or, with the way you're living your life, maybe that next job is you're just displacing your unhappy self into like a new background.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I think there is something to be said about making sure that what you're doing is kind of like long lasting and sustaining. And a lot of us do need mentorship for that, whether it be like someone that we actually find and hire as a mentor or someone that we work side by side with that seems to kind of have some stuff figured out. I think that this is a really interesting project that you've kind of got going here. And I kind of want to hear a little bit more about how the things you experience are translating into this like giving back to the community, essentially giving back to your like nurse homies, basically.
Right. Yeah. So basically my self-development journey has been a whole bunch of like trial and error. And I think that that's what you need to be able to do is to give yourself the grace on this journey. Like you're not going to figure it out in 2 days. Like I've been at this for a year. Like I'm still, figuring out what does and what doesn't work for me. And the self-development book or the self-development world is not as scary and you should not be looked at as weak. I feel like that's like another thing we deal with as nurses that if you need help, you're doing something wrong. Like why aren't you strong enough to push through? So I think the first thing for me was really defining what a nurse is or like what a quote unquote real nurse is, right? I feel like so often the nurses, and they work hard, like I'm not putting down any, but like ICU, ER, those very high paced, high adrenaline jobs, I feel like are kind of at the forefront of what society thinks of as a real nurse, where you need hospice nurses, right? You need those outpatient nurses. You need people that are doing flu shots and flu clinics and follow-up phone calls. And those people are just as much of a nurse as some of those that are, the real nurses that we see in society. And I think for me, that was really hard to come to terms with, right? I've been in very high pressured PICU situations and as a traveler, PICU nurse, and that's not the end all be all, right? Like if I want to work with kids, you just find a job that is more aligned in what you and your kind of work balance needs. Right. And that's why radiology was the perfect fit for me, right? It was all daylights, no holidays, no weekends, but we did sedate cases. So I still had that critical care piece, but it wasn't as like a high stress environment. So I think being able to redefine what my role was and kind of not care about what my other coworkers might think of me, quote unquote, selling out by, picking the easier job.
That's so relative though. Like that's such a subjective thing. Like I hear all the time, well, I don't want to go to a clinic because I'll lose skills. You're going to gain a totally different set of skills.
Totally different. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, like I know that we've had like psychiatric nurses float to my unit. It's very like we're intermediate, right below ICU, and they're very intimidated. But I also know that if I were to go and be in a room with someone who was having some kind of psychological issue, I'm not very useful. So
right.
What's that phrase? Like if you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree or whatever.
Something with like birds flying and fish swimming, something like that. Yeah.
So basically like the environment you're in can be just as challenging and skilled and important as the next one, just because it's not like perceived as like exciting, fast paced, dangerous, live or die.
Right.
We're all still nurses. And yes, you're right. Every piece is important.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think once I kind of got over my own ego and my own hangups, like that was the first huge step for me. And then being on a consistent schedule in a home base, I was a travel nurse. So while it was great to see the country, I know for my sanity and my mental health, I need a little bit more stability in my life. So for me, I was able to find that. And, God bless all those travel nurses. I have friends that have done it for like 5 or 10 years, but it's just not me. And that's fine,
there's
right?
No shame. Like, why does there have to be this negativity? Like you try something, you don't like it, you got a really cool experience and you try something else.
Right. You're always going to learn from it. It's never bad experience, right? Like going to school is never going to be bad. Having a different assignment or being floated, it's, only going to help to build your background and your skill set, right? You're only going to grow from it. And then I think just starting to change my mentality. One of the things I started is a gratitude practice. I know a lot of people in this kind of self-development, personal development world really focus on it, but I found that it has like totally changed my kind of outlook in a fairly short amount of time, right? I know after those really long shifts or, hard days, personal or professional life, you get focused on these like small, maybe 5-minute conversations. And it's a constant reel, right? And it just builds. It's, are you going to have a positive feedback loop or that negative feedback loop? So you need to decide kind of which one you're going to pick. And I think being able to find those moments of joy, even in like the most chaotic shifts, has definitely helped my outlook in nursing. So like something might have, gone wrong and I might have handled the situation wrong or talked down to by a provider. So, in that moment, that might not be the moment to deal with it. But, throughout the shift, when you have a moment, just step off the unit, take your lunch break, which is another thing I advocate for. But like find that moment where you can find like the one thing you learn from or the one thing that you can improve or, that one good thing that happened in the shift. And I feel like that helps to break that negative mentality and you're able to just kind of put it past you and move on. So
yeah. And there's this weird phenomenon. I've talked about it before because, in the inpatient world, we work 12-hour shifts, whatever length of a shift you work. I've talked about how I could have 11 hours of feeling like a rock star nurse. And then if that last hour kind of falls apart, I leave feeling so defeated. Yeah. And it's like, what happened to those 11 hours where I had it all together and nothing derailed my plans? So I think it is really important that we pick and choose. If we're going to nitpick something, let's nitpick the good stuff,
For sure.
Maybe I goofed up, but guess what? I won't ever do that again. I'll remember not to do that thing that got me talked to like an idiot by the provider.
Right. Or like now you know where your resource is, or now you know how to like speak in it like a situation or give some information or, have that hard conversation. So it's not great in the moment, but like where can you grow from this?
Right. If something negative has to happen, how do we take that and make it useful for us? How do we not just have it be like a wasted, icky thing? There's also something that I saw. It was like a meme or something that I saw as I was like scrolling Insta. And it said something like, you need to romanticize every day of your life. So this is a message that's kind of been rattling around in my head a little bit. So when you messaged me and you had your list of kind of the things that you feel most passionate talking about, like finding those positive things, those things to be grateful for, this is a message that has been really relevant to me lately. And I think it's true. That iced coffee that you have on the way to work, you just need to think about that. That's the best damn iced coffee you've ever had. And also, all these things, I'm like, yes.
Go for it. I love it.
But you talked about how important it is to get your breaks in and to take that lunch. And I think that it's not just important for that time, where you get to kind of like regroup and have time for yourself. But I think it's important in giving ourselves these markers throughout the day, like these benchmarks. Like when, what was it? Sonic the Hedgehog, an old video game. You would go through these little flagged areas. And once you got through that point, it was like your benchmark and you've gotten through that part of the level. And Like, you're good. You don't have to go through that part again.
Right.
And I think about little things throughout my day as those like benchmarks. Like when I first get to work, I'm like, okay, I just got to get through the first med pass. I'm not thinking like, oh, I got to get through the next 12 hours. I'm thinking I got to get to like 10 o'clock tonight. Then I can have a granola bar and chug a water. And then I just have to get to my lunch break. And then, you know, so it's like these little points of like good, happy things that I can get to. That's kind of what I've been trying to do lately. And I feel like that really speaks to like what you're saying of like, find these little things, take these moments, like have these moments as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. And like for everybody, it's going to be different, whether you're on a day off or what kind of unit you are. But if you need to sit in the bathroom for 5 minutes, and I know people joke about this all the time, just give your phone to your neighbor. It's going to be fine. Just go sit in the bathroom for 5 minutes and just decompress, right? Like I love taking a trip through the Serenity Garden. If we had to go and check out a patient on a different floor, if the weather was nice, I would go and just walk once or twice around the Serenity Garden and just kind of like recenter and like take some deep breaths and then just move on from there, you know, like let go, whatever had negatively happened, or celebrate like the good thing. And then exactly like you said, you're just ready for the next part of your day.
Yeah. And sometimes like doing that is really difficult, but I think having those moments of gratitude, they change like the synapses in your brain. Like you can think about what you want your default setting to be. And if you want your default setting to be like basically negative all the time, well, that's all you're really going to get out of your day. So I think that's really interesting. You talked in the messages that we sent back and forth to each other, you talked a lot about making personal development, you know, as important, if not more important than professional development. And I know that the hospital that I work at, you know, it's a magnet hospital, level 1 trauma center, the educational institution. There's a lot of push. I've heard people say that like when you're in certain places, your whole identity is that of a nurse. They expect you to do shared governance and research and, you know, teach and take students. And like it feels sometimes, at least where I'm at, like they don't want to give you time to just like have some time off. Like, oh, you got a week off? Work on this educational project. It's like, okay, I love being a nurse. I love the part of me that's a nurse, but there's more to me than just the functions of being a nurse.
Definitely.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So very similar. I also worked at a level 1 trauma magnet hospital, and I agree with you. I think that that is very much, it's great to have that certification, but in order for you to hit it, right, nurses need to hit certain benchmarks. And for us, it was in ICU, it was your CCRN. And day one, when you started, you heard about the certification that you needed to have by your 3rd year, or else you had to find a job somewhere else. And like, that is a huge amount of stress to put on a new grad their first day. They have 3 years to figure this out, right?
You just graduated. Like you just finished school. Like what? Now I got to do it. What?
Right. Like what is my locker and what is my locker combination?
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to know what the certification is.
Hold on.
Right. Yeah. So it just, I think that's just kind of the world that I have always been a nurse in. It's like very driven on school and when are you going back for your MSN or your DNP? And there's nothing wrong with being a bedside nurse. There's nothing wrong with being a community nurse, right? And I feel like we get all this pressure to have more letters after your name or to go for more classes or certifications, which is good up to a point. If you're working in a very specialized area, there's a time and a place for that. But I think being able to switch my mind shift where, or my mindset where I need to pour into myself first, because if I'm not happy with who I am as a person and I'm not comfortable kind of in my skin and what I think my role should be, I'm going to be nothing for my patients, let alone my friends and family. And I think, kind of moving all that energy that I was so focused on my career and started focusing on me. Was it the most comfortable thing to do? No, because I had been avoiding it for, like 30 years. So, you have to put in the hard work, just like you put in the hard work for studying or boards or whatever it is. And I think when you are able to kind of move your energy around more, and especially put it on yourself, the investment that you make on yourself is going to be so much bigger and it is going to last you so much longer than a piece of paper with a few letters on it. And I think just having the confidence, and this sounds so silly, but like I didn't even want to walk down the self-development, personal development book. What do you call it? Aisle, like in the bookstore.
Like, I don't want to see them.
Like, what are people going to think of me that I don't have my stuff together? Like, and it just was all this ego, right? It's that ego I was talking about before. And the first step is definitely the hardest. And I think once you get into it and you see those small changes start to build and build, and you have, you're just kind of gaining that confidence and the knowledge of yourself, I think it's huge. And I think I've been happier in the last year kind of working at myself than I've been kind of in my life. And I mean, I'm fairly young. I'm only 33, but I'm glad that I'm doing this work now as opposed to 20 years from now when I am so burnt out and so miserable as a nurse in whatever field I end up being in. And, having to do the work then, right? Like I can take my 33rd year and on and be like a much happier person. And it's just that consistency. It's those small things that build up. So, better now than 20 years from now.
And how that plays into everything that you do when you take the time to first invest in yourself and your well-being, how much better of a researcher or a nurse or a mentor or a preceptor are you going to be if you're not feeling all of these symptoms of burnout, which can be really intense and can be hard to shake. It's not like this magic thing where you're like, oh, like we've said, it's not something that you can just decide to get rid of. It's a lot of sustained behavior. And I think that we already have all these challenges, put up against us, professional, family. And I think that it makes sense. It's obvious that if we're running on a strong internal system, physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever that is, obviously we're going to do better work. You're just going to be more productive, and the things that you do are going to be of higher quality because you're not like dragging your butt into the meeting with,
zero energy.
You can't lift your eyelids. Exactly. Exactly. So I do think it all comes back to like the fuel that you're putting into the machine and how much productivity are you going to get out of something that you're not putting into. We've got all these kind of challenges that come from our employer, from ourselves. What are some ways that you kind of coach people to meet these challenges and put themselves first? Where do you start when you first meet with someone? Like you're just meeting me and I say, oh my God, my job. And where do we even begin with this?
Well, first we definitely just like work on those core values and figure out like who you are deep down, like what really makes you excited and where you want to see yourself. And I think that one thing that really holds people back is their inability to create boundaries, right? I know a lot of nurses, myself included, are people pleasers, right? They want to help. They want to do everything that they can. And that puts them then at the end of their to-do list. So I know as a nurse, I would always have the manager come over looking for people to pick up overtime, right? And they give you that face, they give you those eyes, and like you just start to feel guilty and you're letting down the unit. And like I know everybody has felt that, please. And then it's like,
well,
yeah, right. Even though like you already had, XYZ plans the next day and you're like, well, I mean, I guess. And they're like, we're so short staffed. Like your coworkers would really, in that moment, it is super hard to have that conversation, but you need to be like, no. And you don't need to give them an explanation. You don't need to give them the laundry list. Like a no is a full sentence. Like that is one of my favorite things to say. No is a full sentence, period, done. And if they start to like, make you feel guilty about it, just bring it up and be like, listen, I need to say no. I need to be able to kind of create this balance. I'm sorry that you're getting so upset or, feeling that you need to kind of give me this guilt trip. I would be more than happy to talk about why you're like using that kind of a tactic. And that usually will kind of put people in their place, or will at least like kind of make them think for a moment. And that is like a super hard conversation to have in the moment. And I am not that great with hard conversations. It's something I've been working on. So again, just go back to that no, period, and then move on kind of thing. And I think the same thing in your personal life too, right? Like friends, family, they can definitely do that same thing. But if you are giving and giving and giving, you're going to have nothing for yourself at the end of the day. And not only do you have to create those boundaries, but then you have to make sure that you stick with them, right? So you can't be like very wishy-washy. And I know that is also something very hard to do. I still am working on it for sure. But kind of slowly over time, people will kind of realize that these are what your boundaries are, right? Like Emily's not going to pick up overtime every week. Maybe I will pick up overtime once or twice a month kind of a thing. And if that is a pattern that you create for yourself, people will know that and will start to be able to kind of respect that. And I think that that definitely helps more long-term as well. Hard in the beginning because you got to break that pattern, right? Very, very hard. And none of the self-development stuff is easy. Like I always talk about these things and people are like, oh, you must have your whole life together. Like, no, I don't. I'm figuring it out like everybody else is.
And it's a practice.
Yes, right. Exactly. You got to consistency is super key. So I think boundaries is like definitely a thing. And I know coming from the ICU, I can't speak to other units because that's where the majority of my experience is, but we are like perfectionists, right? You want all of your lines, you want everything labeled, all in the same color. And that was another thing I had to let go of. I had to stop trying to be this person that everybody thought I should be. And I had to, stop wasting all this energy into making sure that everything looked a certain way, or that I sounded a certain way, or acted a certain way. And I think the beauty of me being able to kind of give up that perfectionism is that I got to be truly who I am, like on the inside, like who I am at my core. And as like I've gotten to know myself on a deeper level, like I feel like I'm laughing a lot more, and not just like laughing, but like belly laughing, snorting laughing, which I would have died if anybody had heard me snort in the past, right? But like you just got to let those things go.
Those are the good laughs, though.
Right?
That's when you're like, when your face hurts a little, and like you kind of got like one rib kind of pinches a bit because you've been laughing so hard.
Exactly. Yeah, and what? Who cares what you look like? Like if you were having a good time, and if this is like super aligned, and like this is filling up your cup, then do it. It doesn't matter what everybody else is thinking. So I think that was another hard thing for me to kind of get over and just, live my life. Life is too short, right? All those cliche sayings, and they're true for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that recognizing the things that make us feel good is really important too, because, I've had moments in my life where I'm bored, I'm restless, I want to do something. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. So sometimes it can be hard. So when we have that consistency piece of it, like you're only going to agree to do overtime a couple times a month. Well, then you already know when that is, and you can kind of set your mind, okay, the weekend that I'm not working overtime, I'm going to be with my family. I'm going to try to really be present for them. Those things are really difficult, but I think those like small goals and setting things up in advance. And if you don't think you're going to stick to it, then you just need to tell people, hey, for personal reasons, I'm only doing one weekend of overtime a month now.
Yeah, 100%.
And something else I wanted to say that I thought of a little while ago. So someone gave me this great communication tool. I'll call it that. I almost said tactic, but that sounds too underhanded. Great communication tool is when you're trying to draw these boundaries. Like, for example, overtime. And just a good example,
everybody has seen that face.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Your boss comes to you, whoever, staffing clerk, whoever it is. We could really use you for another 4 hours.
Yes.
And it's already like you've done 3 12s. You're done. In your head, you're ready to go home. Well, you can say, well, no, I can't because I got to go pick up my kids. Well, can your husband go pick up your kids? No. Basically, if you give an excuse, if you give a reason why you can't, then they can argue you out of that reason. Whereas if you say, sorry, I can't today. Why not? I just can't today. Thanks for considering me. Maybe next time, there's nothing for them to try to wear you down with.
100%. Yeah.
So I think it's really important that you get used to saying those sentences of like, that just doesn't work for me. Or, for personal reasons, I'm not going to do that. Thank you for considering me, but no, thanks. And we got to get comfortable doing that and
for sure.
Feeling that we are of value too. Like, yes, it's important to do X, Y, and Z thing you've been asked to do, but it's really important that you make sure that those things don't eliminate your ability to take care of yourself.
Right.
Because it's easy for me to do that. I'll make commitments and agree until I'm suddenly like, oh, the 4 days off I had are suddenly now 4 days of work. Like, how did I do that to myself?
Yeah.
And then finding moments of like joy and clarity is something else that you've talked about, like during those chaotic shifts.
Yeah.
Like in those moments where like you feel like you don't even have a minute to breathe. How do you find joy in these things?
So again, I think that is like a consistency practice thing for sure. And I remember those shifts where orders just keep coming in fast and furious, right? One patient is crashing and you're trying to get the other patient their meds or whatever. So in the moment, you probably won't be able to find that moment of joy. 100% honest. Like, I'm not going to be like sitting there in the middle of a code being like, what can I take away from this moment as I'm doing chest compressions, right? Not appropriate. But, later on in that shift, just finding like, I know on our unit, we had like a co-nurse floater, just have somebody sit down for 5 minutes and watch your patient. And I think being able to kind of get away from being directly in that moment, it definitely helps. And it could be like literally the smallest thing, like your nursing, we call them neighbors. I'm sure everybody else calls it their neighbor. Like your neighbor gave you a pen, like that on a regular day is like total throwaway. But in the moment, like if that is the one good thing that happened out of your day, like you celebrate that, you like appreciate your neighbor for doing that. And it sounds so cheesy, but for some reason, it's whatever the feedback loop is in our brains. As soon as you start focusing on those small moments, or just going to get a snack, right? You were talking about I just have to get my med pass and then I can get my snack and then kind of regroup. And I think just being able to take yourself out of that super chaotic moment when it is appropriate definitely helps. And it could be something as simple as like, I am breathing, like I am like a healthy individual who has a job, and it might be very frustrating at this moment, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm here and I'm helping this patient, or I was able to place, you know, a really great IV, or, you know, it's those small mundane things when you start to kind of string 4 or 5 of them together, really start to kind of change that loop in your head.
Yeah. I've talked before about how one of the ways that I try to do that, it's not always in the moment, but I keep like a little journal. It's like a sentence journal where if I have like a big day where like somebody paid me a really nice compliment, or I did something I'd never done before. I like finally mastered a skill. I'll just like write a little blip about it, because I need those like euphoric pings where I like go back and I look and I'm like, oh, I used to be terrified to do this. And now I do it like I offer to do it for other people now because I'm so comfortable doing it. I feel like having those little, like whatever it is, whether it's like a journal entry, a Post-it note, some kind of reminder to yourself, because we all get swept up. Like it's hard to have those moments of conscious thought where you're like, oh yeah, I did do some good things today. Like I did do that cool thing. I did help somebody.
Right.
So I think it's really nice to have like those kind of tactile, tangible reminders of like, you did a good job.
Yeah.
One of the things we have a celebration committee on my unit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And sometimes they're just like, you know, the little things they give you is like a little piece of paper, certificate, candy bar, whatever. And, you know, as much as we joke about how like, well, I don't want candy, I want better staffing ratios. Right. But at the same time, it's really nice. Like the other day, I was having a really rough day. Several of us were having a really rough shift. And one of my coworkers just handed me like a giant peanut butter cookie. And I was like, what's this for? And he was like, it's a rough night. Have a peanut butter cookie. Yeah. Those little things like that. I feel like that was him paying forward his like moment of gratitude.
For sure.
I feel like this night sucks. We got cookies.
Right.
Have a cookie.
One good thing out of it.
Yeah. So I think that it's important that we recognize those for ourselves, but that we also kind of like pay it forward a little bit, especially to that person, you know, you see that nurse and you're like, oh God, what's she been doing her night?
Right. I haven't seen her really sit down once.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, her ponytail's getting a little frazzled. Right. I think it's important to recognize those for ourselves, and then also have that culture, like build that culture at work as well.
That's awesome. And I also love that you said that you wrote everything down. One of the things we do in my mentorship program is you have to write a list of 100 accomplishments. And it doesn't matter if it is something as difficult as passing your boards, or like putting in your first IV, or if it's just like, I can't even think of like a super simple one. Like you got out of bed and like you went for a run. It was the longest you've ever run. You know, like all these like simple things, because if you don't write them down, you're not going to remember what you did 4 weeks ago or 4 months ago. And not only is it like a great, like when you're having a bad day, you then get to read over all these awesome things that you've accomplished, and like you add to it, right? I have mine as like a Google Doc, and like every, you know, couple of days, I'll just kind of add to them if something pops out. And that way on like the bad day, I can be like, I'm just going to sit down and read a couple of these, right? I need like a little boost of confidence. Yeah.
It's really funny you say that. In my Google Notepad, I have a list. I heard someone talking about during all this like quarantine social distancing thing, making a list of positive qualities that are about you, not like about something you have or something you've done, but just like about you. And there were a couple things that I put on that list. I just started listing everything, and it was like, I'm a really good whistler.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Another one I'm really proud of, I read lips really well. Because I work with so many patients that are like, they have tracheostomy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really good at lip reading. So it's like funny that like now that's something when people are like, think about one of your good qualities. And those are the first 2 things I think of. Why? Because I actually wrote them down. So I'm like, yeah, I am pretty good at that. Is that going to matter when I fill out my next resume? Probably not. But is it going to make me feel more confident because I know that like I'm like this weird kind of cool, quirky person? Yeah, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know why I thought of that, but because we were talking about the list, and I'm like, yeah, I wrote down that I'm a great whistler. Like, why wouldn't everybody love me? Come on.
Right. right? Yeah.
But yeah, finding those little moments, I think that we have to do that for ourselves, but making that a team effort.
Which I love, yeah.
Yeah. And, there are certain times when I go to work and I look at the staffing board and, it's like all your besties, all the people that like work really well together. And those are the moments when it's like really easy to find those moments of joy. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more difficult to have those moments of joy when you're like floating to a unit where you don't know anybody, or maybe everybody that's there tonight is like really exhausted and grumpy because it's like their third night or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it can be hard, but it's like that habit building that we talked about, like that constant practice.
For sure. Yeah.
That's cool that in the mentoring program though, that you go right for that, because I'm like, I feel like that's a really solid, good way, because sometimes when we don't believe in ourselves, we don't we don't have the ability to believe in ourselves. It's like a muscle we haven't built yet.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, as you're talking, I'm thinking like, this is something that a lot of us, for some of us, we're even resistant to it at first because we've spent so long feeling crappy or bashing ourselves or giving ourselves a hard time because why didn't I do it like this? Because I should have known. Well, no, you didn't. And
didn't know.
Yeah. And you've got to forgive yourself for that. I think that it's like this continuous cycle of like building yourself up, but then also making sure you're not tearing yourself down. Because you can find all these moments of gratitude, but then if at the end of your shift, you talk about all the stupid mistakes you made, you're undoing all of that cycle.
Right. Yeah. It's like that 11 hours were great that you were talking about, and that one thing that dings you at the end of the shift, and it's, game over for the rest of the day.
But, I imagine it's a lot like exercising. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Of course, that first day running a mile is going to feel like terrible, but then after you do it for a month, it gets a lot easier. So it's these constant reminders. Let's talk more about the Fill Up Your Cup project, how it's helping people, what kind of resources you offer, and how people get involved with this. Tell us more. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. So I started this program a couple months ago, like I said, just kind of seeing this need, especially during these crazy COVID times. I feel like nurses and a lot of healthcare providers are just so stressed and they're being inundated with so many things that now is probably when their cup is at like an all-time low. So it's a combination of just kind of these mindset things that we've been talking about, right? And just little tips and tricks that people can start implementing. Nothing is huge and nothing is going to happen overnight. So one of my main philosophies is like a lot of little things are going to build up, and it's going to take a little while, but that consistency will get you there. And just being able to help people find what they're aligned to do, right? It's all about going back to their core and what they really value and what they want out of life, and kind of making sure that that's aligned kind of with what they want to get accomplished in their personal and professional life. So I run a 12-week mentorship program. It's all one-on-one calls. Every week has kind of a different theme that we've been talking about, things that I have found to be helpful or things that other mentors have kind of given me as tools that I found to be helpful, and I'm trying to give those back as well. So there's a whole thing on boundaries because I know boundaries are really hard, especially for new nurses, as we're kind of getting that tough skin when talking with providers and managers and things like that. Simple things to build up your confidence, right? So that list of accomplishments is the first thing we do straight out the gate, because I want you to feel super empowered as we start, because you might not be feeling your best, like you said before. And if you need to borrow like a little bit of my energy and enthusiasm, I'm here for it. But if we can start building that day one, that'll be huge for you. And then kind of after you've gotten to know yourself a little bit better and know what you want, it's all about taking action. I feel like a lot of us just get into these dark places because we're not taking the action, or the action we're taking is totally unaligned with what we want to accomplish. I know on days that I was kind of sitting on the couch, I would beat myself up for not having done anything, but I think my goals and my ambitions were just so big that like, of course I wasn't going to accomplish this, especially in like the funk that I was in. So finding kind of those small goals and checking in every week to make sure that they're still aligned, and allowing people that safe space and a safe environment that they might not have otherwise to kind of do that exploration, which I think is super important. Letting down your boundaries is hard to do with like just yourself, but being able to work one-on-one with another person who might not be in like your close immediate circle is sometimes a little bit easier to kind of flush all these things out, as opposed to like your best friend or your partner or something like that. And then at the end of the program, hopefully we have gotten your energy levels nice and high. You are kind of enjoying life and living the life that you've always wanted to. It's my hope that people have fallen either back in love with nursing, and if nursing is truly not something that is aligned with where they see themselves, we kind of work on a plan to see what other things might fit well for them. So If it's, going back to school, great. If it's trying a whole different career, great. If it's maybe just transferring units or finding kind of your new dream job because the dream job you thought you had was not actually your dream. It was somebody else's dream. So kind of all of that culminates to the end of the 12 weeks that we're together. It's really awesome to see the transformations of how people kind of come in and they're feeling super like unaligned and, that I like to say like their spark isn't there. And then kind of seeing that slowly over time as they start to invest in themselves and put themselves first. It's just so empowering when people kind of figure out the answers on their own. It's not a place where I'm going to tell you what you need to do. It's really kind of giving you some overall ideas and seeing how those will best be implemented in your own life and kind of the spin that you want to take them on so you're most successful.
Sounds fantastic. Where can people find you? Talk about how people contact you if they're interested in your mentorship program.
Sure. So I mostly hang out on Instagram. So I am Emily.Mazurak. And then I just am putting the final touches on my website. So it'll be fillupyourcupproject.com. And there will be lots of great resources on there to come. I'm working on them, trying to get a blog together with, again, those kind of quick tips and tricks about having those hard conversations or about kind of rewriting limiting beliefs or just things you can do to fill up your own cup on your days off, but also while you're in the hospital as well.
Excellent. And I just signed up for your email updates, so I'm looking forward to getting those myself.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think that there's so much to learn, and I love that you're having this very transparent journey and you're sharing these resources and you're growing. I love looking at new projects or new organizations and seeing how that work blossoms. I really look forward to seeing how everything comes about. And I love that you've decided to come and talk with us today.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with or any other messages that you want to send away with them?
I feel like that's like the $1 million question. There's like so many little tidbits, right?
You can give a cookie recipe.
I know, right?
Secret for world peace, whatever you want.
I think, I did start doing the sourdough starter. That was like my one quarantine hobby that I picked up, which worked out well. But I think just the importance for you to realize that like how much you can get when you start investing in yourself. And I say investing because, it starts off with a book or getting a mentor. And from there, you'll be able to grow and blossom in ways that either you would never get there on your own, or it would take you so much longer to get there on your own, as opposed to having somebody kind of tell you their story and kind of help to take you on that journey. And that's what I'm here for. That's why I love to tell my story, because if I can figure it out, and this, I do nothing related to personal development, burnt out to the extreme, like it is possible. And you just need to have the faith and take that first leap, which is always the hardest.
Emily, thank you for joining us today. Fill Up Your Cup project sounds fantastic. I look forward to hearing more. And everyone also, in addition to checking out the Fill Up Your Cup project, go to nursinguncensored.com. We have boatloads of content there for you and more to come. So thanks again for joining me. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. And until then, happy nursing. Here at Nursing Uncensored, we may be, uncensored, but we're not unfiltered. Protected health information has been changed and concealed to comply with HIPAA. The things we talk about are from years of experience with thousands of patients, things we've read, stories we've heard. If you think we're talking about you, we're definitely not. Also, we're real nurses here to provide helpful and accurate information. But don't take anything we say as fact without doing your own research. Refer to your state's Board of Nursing, Practice Acts, and your institution's policies and procedures if you have questions about your practice. Lastly, our very strong opinions are ours alone and do not reflect those of our employers, educational, or professional institutions. Thanks for listening, and happy nursing, folks.